Have you ever noticed how the more available you are, the less you seem to be valued? It begins subtly, a delayed response here, a missed acknowledgement there. And then, before you even realize it, your time, your energy, your very presence becomes something cheap, taken for granted, expected without gratitude. You become invisible, not because you lack value, but because you've made yourself too accessible. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to a better understanding of ourselves." But what he left unsaid is just as powerful. Everything we allow in others teaches them how much of us they can consume. When you are always there, always giving, always reachable, you are silently telling the world that your boundaries are flexible, that your soul is open terrain for anyone to walk across without permission. Withdrawal is not cowardice. It is not pettiness. It is not cruelty. It is the silent announcement that you will no longer participate in your own disrespect. It forces a crisis in the minds of those who once thought they could predict you. And in that crisis, their true character is revealed. Who values you, who needs you only when you are easy, who fears losing you not because of love, but because of what you provide. The most dangerous power you can ever possess is not domination. It is invisibility, strategic invisibility. The ability to remove yourself without noise, without explanation, without anger. Just absence, pure and final. Because absence echoes louder than presence ever could. And yet, society teaches you something different, doesn't it? It trains you from the moment you are born to offer yourself up as a sacrifice for acceptance, to be good, to be kind, to be endlessly available. What if that entire lesson was a lie, a design to weaken you before you even knew you were playing a game? There is a deeper truth hidden in plain sight, a truth about how society shapes you into a tool for its own convenience. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Stay close, because the next layer will reveal just how deeply your availability has been weaponized against you without you ever realizing it. From the very first moments of your life, a message is imprinted into your mind. Be available, be responsive, be agreeable, be ready to serve the needs of others without hesitation. It is presented as virtue, dressed up in the language of kindness and love. But hidden behind that beautiful mask is a far colder reality. You are being trained to erode yourself. As a child, you learned that the faster you responded to others' demands, the more approval you received. Smile when you're uncomfortable. Say yes, even when you mean no. Answer the call. Reply to the message. Show up, even if it costs you your peace. The lesson was never about your needs. It was always about your utility, how useful you could be to those around you. Your speed, not your soul, became the measure of your worth. Over time, this conditioning turns you into something dangerous to yourself, an emotional vending machine. Insert a request, receive a response. No resistance, no delay, no questions. And just like a machine, you become easy to use, easy to ignore, easy to resent. People do not love what they can endlessly consume. They despise it. This is the great betrayal that few are ever prepared to see. The more you pour yourself out without boundaries, the more invisible you become. Not because you are unworthy, but because you have hidden your worth behind a wall of constant availability. You have taught others to expect you, not to value you. But here is where the current begins to shift. The moment you withdraw, truly withdraw, the entire structure trembles. People who once expected your immediate response begin to experience anxiety. Their comfort with your predictability dissolves. You are no longer a certainty, you are a mystery, and mysteries demand respect. Imagine the emotional shockwave that ripples through a relationship when the easy energy supply disappears, when the one who always said yes says nothing. When the emotional vending machine jams and refuses to operate, it is not anger that emerges first. It is fear. fear of facing what your availability was covering up in them all along. Most people will do anything to avoid facing themselves, and that is why your withdrawal is so powerful. It forces them into a mirror they cannot escape. But the question remains, why does this dynamic hurt you so much before you finally pull away? Why do you feel so exhausted, so drained, so hollow after years of giving too much too freely? There is a hidden cost to constant availability, a cost you've been paying every single day without realizing it. And if you want to reclaim your strength, you must first see where your true power is bleeding out. Let's go deeper. If something is awakening in you as you listen, you're already part of the few. Subscribe now and stay close to the journey. Thank you for being here. There is a law of the psyche that few understand, and even fewer dare to live by. Carl Jung knew it well. Psychic energy is finite. You do not have endless wells of emotional strength to draw from. Every thought, every conversation, every impulsive reaction drains a little more from your reservoir. And most people, they are leaking their life force without even noticing. Think about the arguments you engage in just to defend your point. The endless explanations you give to people who have already decided not to understand you. The way your mind races, defending, justifying, pleasing, performing. Each small act, harmless on its own, compounds into a slow, invisible hemorrhage of your energy. And here is the truth most cannot bear to confront. Predators can smell it, not in the Hollywood sense of sinister villains lurking in shadows, but in the everyday sense. Emotional vampires, manipulative colleagues, needy acquaintances, they can sense when your boundaries are thin, when your reserves are low, when your soul is too exposed. They do not think about it consciously. They simply drift toward the warmest, easiest source of nourishment. You become that source when you are too quick to respond, too eager to explain, too available to meet every need that is not your own. Every unsolicited text you reply to, every argument you step into that does not serve your growth, every situation you endure out of guilt, it all adds up. Drop by drop, you are drained. But here is the dark elegance hidden within this reality. Once you begin to guard your psychic energy, the predators scatter. They find nothing to feed on. Your silence becomes a wall they cannot penetrate. Your refusal to engage becomes a mirror that forces them to confront their own hunger. Managing your energy is not a luxury. It is not a self-care trend. It is survival. It is the difference between living as a sovereign being or dying by 1,000 emotional cuts. You cannot fight every battle. You cannot answer every call. You cannot rescue everyone who demands your attention. Every time you do, you trade a piece of your vitality for someone else's comfort, and in the end, they do not even remember it. But it gets even more insidious. There is another mechanism operating below the surface, one that binds you to the very people draining you, and it is older, deeper, more dangerous than simple neediness. It's called projection, and if you do not master it, you will continue to bleed out your life force, trying to solve wounds that were never yours to heal. Let's uncover it. Most manipulation does not happen through open hostility. It happens through something far more subtle, far more invasive: projection. Carl Jung revealed that every person carries within them a hidden reservoir of unacknowledged fears, desires, insecurities, and shame. And when they cannot face these shadows inside themselves, they cast them outward. They project them onto the people around them, like a painter throwing color onto a blank canvas. Only the canvas is you. When you make yourself perpetually available, you become that canvas. You offer yourself up as the surface onto which others can project their unresolved chaos. The friend who constantly leans on you for emotional support, but never shows up when you need them. They are projecting their need to be saved. The partner who demands your endless reassurance. They are projecting their own unhealed abandonment. The colleague who undermines your confidence with passive-aggressive remarks. They are projecting their internal inadequacy. And the more available you are, the more material they have to work with. You begin to absorb problems that were never yours. You start to carry emotions that do not belong to you. Without realizing it, you become entangled in other people's psychic debris. You find yourself anxious without knowing why, exhausted after seemingly meaningless conversations, resentful even though you agreed to help. It feels like you are drowning in emotions that seem alien, because they are. But listen closely. Withdrawal cuts this cycle at the root. When you step back, when you stop being the automatic receptor for everyone's projections, something fascinating happens. They are forced to confront their own darkness without a willing scapegoat. They panic, they blame, they lash out, because your absence shatters the delicate ecosystem of emotional displacement they have built around you. Some will accuse you of being selfish. Some will call you cold. Some will even try to guilt you back into their web. But every accusation they hurl reveals exactly what they were projecting onto you all along. And there is another layer to this that few anticipate. The more you stop absorbing projections, the more you reclaim your true emotional landscape. You begin to feel your own feelings again, to hear your own thoughts more clearly, to know your own needs without distortion. You realize just how much noise you had mistaken for your own voice. But if silence can protect you from projections, it can also do something even more powerful. It can turn the tables completely. It can make you the mirror instead of the canvas, the unreadable, uncontrollable force that others fear, respect, and cannot manipulate. And that power starts with one weapon sharper than any sword: true silence. Not the silence of repression, but the silence of mastery. Let's step into it. Silence is not the absence of words. It is the presence of power. When most people think of silence, they imagine passivity, weakness, submission. They could not be more wrong. Real silence, the kind that Carl Jung understood, and the kind that transforms the very fabric of human interaction, is active. It is deliberate. It is a weapon forged through discipline and wielded through mastery. When you stop reacting immediately to every word, every request, every emotional outburst thrown at you, you dismantle the invisible threads that others use to pull you like a puppet. You stop feeding their narratives. You starve their projections. You become, in their eyes, unpredictable. And unpredictability, when wielded correctly, is terrifying. Have you ever noticed how the person who reacts the least often holds the most power in a room? How the one who listens without rushing to agree or disagree seems to carry a kind of magnetic weight? It is not charisma. It is not luck. It is conscious, energetic dominance. Carl Jung taught that individuation, the process of becoming truly oneself, requires a withdrawal into fertile silence, a space where you can digest your experiences, confront your shadows, and reorganize your psychic energy without external contamination. Silence is the womb where transformation occurs. But in the external world, silence does something even more disruptive. It creates mental tension. When you are silent, you force others to sit with their own words, their own discomfort, their own projections. They cannot offload their chaos onto you because you are no longer an available receptacle. They have to deal with themselves, and people fear that more than anything. The less you explain yourself, the more others will imagine. The less you react, the more they will wonder. The less you reveal, the more valuable your presence becomes. In a world addicted to instant emotional discharge, being unreadable is a superpower. But listen closely, because this is where many go wrong. Silence must not be cold repression. It must not be passive-aggressive punishment. It must be sovereign detachment, a silence born from self-possession, not bitterness. You're not closing off because you are wounded. You're closing off because you are choosing where your energy flows. And here is where the real twist comes in. When you master silence, you do not just protect yourself from manipulation. You become a mirror so sharp that others either recoil in terror or are forced to evolve. They see themselves reflected back with nowhere to hide. They feel the emptiness of their own words when they are no longer echoed. They confront the reality that their influence over you was never real. It was borrowed from your willingness to engage. But if withdrawing your energy starts to reshape the battlefield, what happens to you internally? What transformation unfolds when you leave behind the emotional games completely? That is where the real rebirth begins, and that is where we are going next. When you withdraw from the noise, the chaos, and the emotional games of others, the first thing you encounter is not peace, it is pain. A strange, hollow ache begins to form inside you. You feel the phantom pains of relationships you once clung to, identities you once performed, validations you once sought. Your body and mind, so used to the dopamine hits of emotional entanglement, rebel against the silence. They crave the drama, the arguments, the endless cycles of give and take that once defined your existence. This is the withdrawal phase, and it is brutal. It feels like loneliness, but it is actually detoxification. Carl Jung described individuation not as a comfortable process, but as a confrontation with everything false you had once accepted as true. It is a collapse, a death of old forms, and the silence you enter after withdrawal is not just absence, it is a crucible. It burns away the noise until only the essential remains. You will be tempted to run back to the familiar, to answer that call, to send that text, to resume the games where at least you knew the rules. But if you endure the discomfort, something extraordinary happens. First, the guilt fades. The programmed guilt, the one telling you that you are selfish for choosing yourself, that you are cruel for prioritizing your peace, begins to lose its grip. You start to see how deeply conditioned you were to betray your own energy for the approval of others. Then clarity emerges, not all at once, but in fragments. You begin to see who truly cared for you and who only cared for what you could provide. You realize how many conversations were empty, how many smiles were transactional, how much of your life was built on the quicksand of unspoken expectations. And after clarity, something even rarer arrives, true peace. A peace that does not depend on being understood, a peace that does not need constant reassurance, a peace that is not rattled by others' disappointment or anger. This is the rebirth Jung hinted at, the moment when your psychic energy, once scattered across 1,000 unworthy battles, returns to you. Your boundaries become instinctive, not forced. Your time becomes sacred, not negotiable. Your presence becomes potent, not diluted. You realize that solitude is not loneliness, it is sovereignty. But beware, not everyone will celebrate your rebirth. In fact, some will react with hostility, guilt-tripping, or sudden silence of their own. Because when you change the rules of engagement, and those who benefited from the old rules will not give them up easily. The collapse of false relationships is coming, and you must be ready to face it without fear, because what falls away was never truly yours to begin with. When you begin to withdraw, to reclaim your energy, to stop being endlessly available, something strange and unsettling happens. The people you thought would understand the most often understand the least. Those who once praised your loyalty now accuse you of selfishness. Those who relied on your endless support now paint you as cold. Those who once smiled in your presence begin to sharpen their words behind your back. Why? Because your withdrawal breaks the illusion they depended on. As long as you were available, agreeable, and endlessly giving, they could avoid facing themselves. You were the buffer between them and their own emptiness. You were the audience clapping for their performance, the sounding board validating their complaints, the net catching them every time they fell without responsibility. When you withdraw, you force a confrontation they never wanted, a confrontation with their own inadequacy, their own dependency, their own manipulations. Carl Jung understood this dynamic intimately. He wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. But not all reactions are peaceful. Some are violent, some are desperate. You will see people weaponize guilt. They will remind you of everything you owe them. They will recount your history, twisting moments of kindness into debts to be repaid. Some will try to provoke anger, hoping to pull you back into the chaos where they still feel powerful. Others will simply vanish, as if your existence depended solely on your compliance. When you stop feeding their needs, they find a new source, and they leave without looking back. At first, this feels like loss, like betrayal, but slowly you begin to see it for what it really is, revelation. You realize that these relationships were conditional all along. They loved the version of you that served them, not the version that stood on its own. And as the false connections collapse, something remarkable happens. Space opens. Space for truth. Space for authentic relationships, not built on dependency, but on mutual respect. Space for you to breathe without constantly shrinking yourself. But it will not come easily. The collapse will test you. It will tempt you to return to your old patterns just to avoid discomfort. Resist. Because the few who remain, the few who respect your boundaries, who honor your silence, who do not demand more than you are willing to give, those are the relationships that are real. Those are the ones worth building. And as the dust settles, you will discover the next truth. True power does not come from being surrounded by many. It comes from standing sovereign, even if it means standing alone. There is a moment after the collapse where everything feels unbearably quiet. No constant messages, no urgent demands, no buzzing distractions pulling at your energy, just silence. And it is here that many people panic. They mistake this silence for failure, for isolation, for abandonment. But the truth is, this silence is not death, it is birth. Carl Jung taught that individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, requires solitude, not as a punishment, but as a necessary crucible. Without the constant noise of others' expectations, you finally hear your own voice. Without the relentless pull of external demands, you finally see where your true priorities lie. It is in distance that the strongest selves are forged. Look at nature. The mountain stands alone. The deepest trees grow where the forest is thick and quiet. The strongest rivers cut their path not by shouting or fighting, but by steady, persistent movement far from the crowds. Human beings are no different. True power does not come from pleasing the masses. It comes from daring to step away, to stand still when others rush, to stay silent when others scream, to build an inner world so complete that the external world loses its grip. But listen closely, because this is where many fail. They think solitude is hiding. Withdrawal born of fear is not power, it is surrender. What we are talking about here is conscious, chosen distance, a retreat not from life, but from the illusions that have held you captive. In this space, you do not isolate yourself from love or connection or meaning. You isolate yourself from manipulation, chaos, and self-betrayal. You become rare, and what is rare becomes valuable. Those who master solitude walk differently. They speak with weight. They carry an invisible authority that others can sense but cannot touch. They have no need to convince, no need to prove, no need to perform. And when they choose to engage, their presence alone shifts the dynamic of every room they enter. Few understand this because few are willing to pay the price of real freedom, standing alone when necessary. But those who do become unstoppable. And as you begin to feel this power rise within you, another challenge emerges, one even deeper and more confronting. Because now you must decide, will you continue the path of becoming fully yourself, even if it means walking away from everything and everyone that demands your submission? Or will you retreat back into the safety of old patterns, abandoning the transformation you have fought so hard to begin? The final decision is yours. But make no mistake, it will define everything that follows. There is a moment in every journey of awakening where the greatest enemy is no longer the world around you, but the part of you that clings to the past. The part that still aches for approval. The part that still fears being alone. the part that still wants to be understood by those who never tried to understand you in the first place. Carl Jung understood this with brutal clarity. Individuation, he said, demands the death of the false self, the self built from borrowed expectations, unconscious fears, and desperate attachments. And make no mistake, the death of this false self feels like a real death, because it is. When you choose yourself fully, you must accept the reality that some people will never applaud you for it. They will resent you, they will mock you, they will paint you as selfish, cold, or arrogant. But here is the raw truth. You do not need their applause. You never did. The true self does not emerge to be celebrated by the crowd. It emerges to be free. And freedom is terrifying, not because it is painful, but because it strips away every excuse you once had for playing small. No more blaming others, no more waiting for permission, no more hoping someone else will save you from your own compromises. The power you seek is already within you, but to claim it, you must be willing to burn the bridges to your old life, to stop explaining yourself, to stop negotiating your worth, to stop watering dead gardens, hoping they will bloom. And above all, you must be willing to stand alone, if that is what truth demands. Because once you choose yourself, truly and irrevocably, you become immune to the games that once controlled you. No guilt can bind you, no shame can chain you, no rejection can destroy you. You are no longer reacting to the world, you are creating it. So now the question that cannot be avoided: will you have the courage to choose yourself? Will you have the strength to walk forward even when the path is empty, even when the voices behind you call you back? Or will you betray yourself one more time, for comfort, for company, for the illusion of acceptance? The choice is yours, and it always has been. If you are ready, if you feel something burning inside you right now, write it in the comments. I choose my peace. Declare it, own it, and never look back. And if this journey has awakened something in you, this is just the beginning. The next video will take you even deeper into mastering your emotional sovereignty, into becoming someone who does not just survive the world, but reshapes it. Subscribe, stay close, and keep moving forward, because the world does not need more people who fit in. It needs more people who have the courage to stand alone, and that person is you.